I'm Helen Walker. I am the no-nonsense anxiety resolving therapist, and I am going to try to do a 10-minute video covering 5 tips on how to deal with feelings of anxiety. So before I even start, you get a free tip, and that tip is to scale. So quite often when we are used to feeling anxious, we tend to go into black and white thinking. So I'm really, really anxious, or I'm not, I'm fine. And actually there's a massive difference between the two extremes. So have a think now and think, if 0 is no anxiety at all and 10 is I've never felt worse, where are you right now? And just keep an eye on that. It's a really good barometer so you can see what helps you feel better when you're having good days, when you're having bad days, and when maybe you need to ask somebody for help. Right, so there's 2 different types of anxiety, which not everybody realises. I call the first one the caveman anxiety because it's that instinctive reaction to stuff that causes the fight, flight or freeze response. So really, really useful when you're a caveman and a tiger jumped out of those bushes and you went and then your blood pressure went up, your heart rate went up, your cortisol went around your body, and you were ready to fight it, run away from it, or stay really, really still so it didn't notice you. Really not very useful in this day and age because we don't tend to have that many tigers chasing us, and it tends to be a reaction that is a slight overreaction to situations, but we still react in that way. So the good news is that breathing techniques can really, really help with that. Lots of different breathing techniques out there. The 7-11 technique is the one that I prefer to use because it reverses that physiological reaction. So rather than doing a big breath in, little breath out, you're doing a little smaller breath in and a bigger breath out, and you're reversing that biological reaction so that you're reducing your heart rate, you're reducing the blood pressure, and the cortisol stops going around your body and you calm right down. You can't get it wrong either. You can't get it wrong, and it's not mind over matter. It is just a pure reaction that you can control. It's also really, really useful to practice on a regular basis so that you just bring your anxiety levels down generally, and also so that when you really need it, your body knows what it is that it's doing. That's number 1. Number 2 is the second type of anxiety, which is kind of based around your imagination. And it's one of those things where it's got a because in it. So I'm really nervous about appearing on a video camera because I tend to get tongue-tied. It's that setting yourself up, rehearsing something going wrong. Now, it's really, really powerful to rehearse things in your mind in a positive way. It's also really powerful to rehearse in a negative way because your body can't tell the difference between your imagination and what's real. So if you think about the chocolate test or the lemon test, where you imagine putting a piece of chocolate in your mouth or a piece of lemon in your mouth, and you close your eyes and you really concentrate on that, you notice that within a couple of minutes you swallow or your mouth is watering. And when I was training, in fact, we did the chocolate test, and one of the girls, when we opened our eyes, said, "Oh my God." And she'd come up in a rash because she was allergic to chocolate, and her body had literally reacted with the same reaction it had when she ate chocolate. So be aware that what you imagine is priming your body for what's happening next. So not such a great thing to do in terms of worrying about stuff, but a great way of turning things around and thinking of the positives, imagining the positives. So if you can't come up with a positive, think of something that you might like to change about a situation. So how you're going to react to something, and practice picturing that change in the reaction instead. So that is number 2. Number 3 is self-care. So self-care is quite often talked about in terms of scented candles around your bath and in your PJs and on the sofa, and that's great. But self-care to me is about having enough sleep, eating properly, doing some exercise, getting outside and getting some fresh air. They're the really key things. But I also started reading a long time ago about a thing called the rice experiment, which somebody called Dr. Emoto did in the 1990s. And it was debunked lots of times and it's been copied lots of times, but I wanted to see it for myself because there's nothing better than seeing something for yourself. And basically what you do with the rice experiment is you get three identical jars, but different jars. You put identical amounts of rice in each one and identical amounts of water in each one. One you label I love you, one you label I hate you, and one you don't label because you're going to completely ignore it. And every day you send the I love you one, you tell it you love it and you send it positive thoughts. The one that you've told you hate it, you tell it you hate it and you send it negative thoughts and you ignore the third one. And I recreated the experiment and the results in that the I love you one has a pink haze of something over the top of it. You can still see through the water, you can still see the rice. The I hate you one has like a yellowy sort of mucus on top of it. It's disgusting and it smells really bad. And the other one is kind of grey and cloudy and the rice isn't looking too great. And over time, I think those things continue. You can look it up. It's Dr. Emoto, E-M-O-T-O. And his theory was that positive or negative thoughts can affect molecules of water. And they can change the water. Therefore, in this experiment, they're changing the water, which changes the rice. Now, if you follow that through, you and me as humans are 60 to 70% water. So the words and the thoughts that we use for each other and for ourselves really have an impact on how we react to things physically as well as emotionally and mentally. So from a self-care perspective, I suggest that either you try to be aware of it and say nice things to yourself, be the positive words that you would say to your friend, or just practice on your plants, and as you get better with your plants, be nicer to yourself. But basically, if you wouldn't say it to your friend, don't say it to yourself, and then try to tweak it a bit so you get a bit better. Fourth one, labels. Okay, so labels can be really useful in some respects, but labels can also be very, very unhelpful. And if you think about labels that you see on a day-to-day basis, they are literally black and white. They are commands. They're actually printed in black and white quite often. This side up, don't touch, hold upright, all those sorts of things. Now, the labels that we give ourselves start to define us. And quite often we'll label ourselves as I have anxiety. Now, having anxiety is a big label to own. And then quite often we talk about my anxiety. And once it's mine, it's absolutely part of you. The same way that this is my right hand, it's part of me. It can't be separated because it's mine. So my anxiety is not a great term to use. What I suggest to my clients instead is you think about where that feeling is in your body. So maybe your stomach, maybe your chest, your shoulders, your neck, your head. And then think about maybe what temperature it is, what colour it is, what sensation it has. So quite often we have a hot sensation in our stomach, a stabbing pain in our shoulders, a hot feeling in our head, those sorts of feelings. Now those are much easier to get rid of than my anxiety. And the story I use as an example for this is I did some volunteer work in a school a few years ago and had a group of children, and they really struggled with the fact that they'd been labelled as having anxiety, because when you're 13, 14, how do you fix my anxiety? And so we talked about different labels you could use and came up with some different ideas. And I said, right, so what are you going to call these feelings? And without missing a beat, one of the boys said, I'm calling mine Debbie. So if you want to give yours an actual name or borrow his name, you can call yours Debbie too. Makes it an awful lot easier to get rid of Debbie than my anxiety. And then the last one is about expectation. So this is when you anticipate something happening. And I'm not saying that you manifest it, but you're rehearsing it the same way as we talked about with the imagination. When you're tired, worried, under pressure or stressed, you tend to move towards the negative. You assume the negative, which was, again, that caveman response. It's great when there's a possibility it's a tiger because it's protecting you. not so great now. So just be aware that that can create expectation. And also when something becomes a pattern, we expect it to happen. So if you know that you usually feel nervous standing up in front of people, you tend to expect to feel nervous, then because you're expecting that, you create that in your body because you've rehearsed it. So just be aware that it's not always the case. Sometimes you can let go. Sometimes that feeling inside you isn't nervousness and scaredness and anxiety. Maybe it's excitement, because actually the two are very, very similar. I hope that was really helpful. I'll put my contact details at the end of this. I'm on Facebook as Helen Walker Hypnotherapy, and also on Instagram as the same. Thank you. Look after yourself. Bye bye.